Princeton opened its 1988 football season against Cornell University, the same team it crushed in its final game of the 1987 season. On the opening series, it was evident that this was not the same Cornell squad of a year ago. Cornell's Brent Ferlito sacked quarterback Jason Garrett on the opening play, and the Big Red stopped Princeton cold on its first series. The wet AstroTurf and cold weather made it difficult for either team to generate much offense, leaving a scoreless first quarter. Early in the second quarter, Cornell began to penetrate into Princeton territory. Tiger cornerback Frank Leal almost intercepted Cornell Dave Dossey's pass in the end zone. But 2 plays later, running back Frank Maliga rushed into the end zone to give the Big Red a 7-0 lead. The Tigers returned fire on the next series. Jason Garrett put together a series of passes and rushes, including this 25-yarder to his brother Judd, to march the Tigers down to the Cornell 6-yard line. From there, fullback Greg DeFelice hammered his way into the end zone. Sophomore place kicker Chris Lutz, one of Princeton's biggest preseason question marks in its offensive arsenal, easily added the extra point to even the score at 7-all. As Dossey began to lead Cornell back down the field, Princeton's tenacious defense pressured the Cornell quarterback. He threw the ball into the hands of outside linebacker Craig Yates, who outsprinted Cornell defenders for a 65-yard touchdown run. With 1 minute left in the half, Dossey bounced back on the next series, hitting wide receiver Sean McCory on the Princeton 20-yard line. Frank Maliga then made a spectacular diving grab in the end zone with only 36 seconds remaining. Cornell's extra point attempt tied the score at 14-all at the end of the first half. Tiger defensive back Vince Avalone emerged for the second half with fire in his eyes, blocking this Cornell punt for a 2-point safety in the end zone. Princeton's offense, meanwhile, was working some magic of its own, pulling off this reverse to Trevor Crossan for a 26-yard gain. A penalty for offsides and a Cornell sack forced the Tigers to settle for a field goal by Chris Lutz. Princeton's defense, spearheaded by Frank Leal, Rick Emery, and Craig Yates, began to punish the Big Red offense, allowing only a 41-yard field goal in the entire second half. Midway through the fourth quarter, the Tigers marched downfield. Tight end Mark Rockefeller made a diving catch for a short gain, and Judd Garrett took this pitch for a 56-yard run, setting up a 1st and goal from the 5-yard line. Rockefeller almost made another spectacular catch as he dove outstretched for the ball in the end zone. 2 plays later, DeFelice scored his 2nd touchdown of the game, barreling into the end zone behind the lead block of number 40, Judd Garrett. A fumble recovery forced by Kurt Hovan and an interception by Frank Leal sealed the game for the Tigers, giving the team its first victory, 26-17. In week 2 of the season, the Tigers returned to Palmer Stadium to face the Holy Cross Crusaders, the powerhouse team of the Colonial League. The Tigers last played Holy Cross in 1916, and in 4 games since then, Princeton has gone undefeated and unscored upon. In their last 2 seasons, however, the Crusaders had lost only 1 game behind All-American quarterback Jeff Wiley. Tiger kickoff returner Chris Keys seemed undaunted by the Crusaders' impressive statistics, as he ran the opening kickoff 60 yards to the Holy Cross 20-yard line. Unable to muster much of a rushing game against Cornell, the Tigers took to the air early in the game. Jason Garrett showed incredible poise, finding running back Dennis Height as he was being sacked and falling down. Garrett then connected with senior Dave Wicks to set up an eventual Princeton field goal by Lutz. On the defensive side, Princeton was swatting down Wiley's passes, and linebacker Franco Paganelli was crushing the Crusaders in their path. As they say, good offense follows good defense, and Princeton was no exception as wide receivers Dave Wicks and Scott Gibbs pulled in a pair of passes to carry the Tigers down to the Holy Cross 3-yard line. From there, Greg DeFelice, Princeton's leading scorer, added his 3rd touchdown in just 2 games. Holy Cross refused to give up, and on the next series pulled to within 3 points of the Tigers on this touchdown run by Joe Segretti. Princeton continued to dominate the game offensively with some stellar passing and running by Judd Garrett, Scott Gibbs, and Dave Wicks. Running trio eventually set up this Chris Lutz 37-yard field goal to boost the Tigers' lead to 6 points midway through the second quarter. The seesaw battle continued as the Crusaders once again threatened deep in Tiger territory. Franco Paganelli, Frank Leal, and Greg Burton were temporarily able to stall the Holy Cross offense. However, on 3rd down, the scrambling Wiley was finally able to elude the defense and find split end Mark Gallagher in the end zone. Princeton's defensive backfield, led by Vince Avalone, Greg Burton, and Mike Harrow, continued to punish Holy Cross receivers. But the Crusaders were still able to muster a field goal to increase their lead to 4 points. On the Crusaders' next offensive series, linebacker Franco Paganelli's bone-crushing tackle forced Joe Segretti to fumble the ball. Jason Garrett then found Dave Wicks with a 17-yard touchdown pass to the end zone. Tiger cornerback Vince Avalone picked off 2 consecutive Holy Cross passes in the secondary. Avalon's 3 steals on the season put him on track to break All-American Dean Cain's record 12 interceptions in a season. With the ball back in his possession, head coach Steve Toshis caught the Crusaders off guard by calling for a reverse to wide receiver Trevor Crossan. However, Princeton was unable to muster another first down and had to settle for a field goal by the sure-footed Chris Lutz. On the next series, free safety Mike Hero proved that he too could pick off Jeff Wiley's pass attempts. Down by 6 points and with 4 minutes remaining in the game, Holy Cross fought its way deep into Tiger territory. On 4th and 14, the Crusaders received some help from the Tigers as defensive back Brian Wytham was called for pass interference. The penalty enabled Holy Cross to score an eventual touchdown and take a 1-point lead. With only 1 minute and 13 seconds left in the game, the Tigers refused to quit. In what looked like a repeat of the previous season's last-second victory over Lehigh, Jason Garrett put together a string of passes to DeFelice, Gibbs, and his brother Judd. With 9 seconds remaining, Chris Lutz kicked a 35-yard field goal to give the Tigers the apparent victory. 7 seconds remained on the clock, and the Tigers still had to kick off to Holy Cross. In a play reminiscent of the famous USC-Stanford game in 1985, the Crusaders' kickoff returner Darren Cromwell made a controversial lateral to teammate Tim Donovan. Donovan streaked down the sideline and into the end zone to give the Crusaders the victory in what many called one of the most exciting college football games in recent history. After the heartbreaking 30-26 loss to Holy Cross, the Tigers were looking for their first home victory of the season against a Brown University team it had not beaten since 1983. The Tigers were 9-point favorites and were looking to avenge last year's 13-7 loss to the Bruins up in Providence. Brown was seemingly unimpressed by the Tigers' 5 interceptions in its last 2 outings, and on the second play of the game, junior quarterback Danny Clark took to the air for a 32-yard reception to wide receiver Mike Giroux. Plays later, the Bruins went for the razzle-dazzle, executing a perfect Statue of Liberty play, ending with a diving catch by the outstretched Giroux. Less than 2 minutes into the game, the stunned Tigers were already down by 7 points. Not about to play second fiddle to Clark, Jason Garrett showed why he was later nominated as league MVP and All-Ivy first team, as he connected with Dave Wicks to bring the Tigers down to the Brown 12-yard line. The Tigers had an opportunity to score on 3rd and goal, but Jason's rifle pass went in and out of the hands of his brother Judd. The Tigers were forced to settle for a Chris Lutz field goal. Despite some strong defense by Rick Emery and Rob Vandenhoven, the Tigers were unable to stop the lethal Clark to Giroux connection. As the first quarter wound down, the Bruins had taken a commanding 14-3 lead. Princeton had its own offensive weapon in its sure-handed tight end Mark Rockefeller. Garrett found Rockefeller 3 times during this drive, the last time in the corner of the end zone for a touchdown. successful two-point conversion to Mark Rockefeller helped narrow the Bruins' lead to 3 points. The Bruins' option offense continued to keep Princeton on its toes as Clark high-stepped his way through the Tiger defense. Meanwhile, Brown's offensive line was opening up gaping holes for running back Mike Bottolato, and Brown increased its lead to 21-11. Princeton's offense was doing its best to keep the Tigers in the game. Garrett hit Scott Gibbs down the field, and then Rockefeller made a spectacular diving catch to give the Tigers a crucial first down. After Garrett picked up 8 yards on this keeper, the Tigers ran a draw play to fullback Dennis Height for a touchdown and narrowed the Bruin lead to 3 points. Clark, once again, worked the option to move the Bruins within striking distance of the Princeton end zone. But his brilliant touchdown pass was called back on an interference penalty. Brown was forced to settle for a field goal and only a 6-point lead at the end of the first half. Princeton opened the second half on the offensive. Garrett once again took to the air, completing passes to Rockefeller and DeFelice, while his brother Judd broke one of his patented sidestepping runs for a 30-yard gain. Judd eventually barreled his way into the end zone to give the Tigers their first lead of the game. Early in the fourth quarter, Judd Garrett made one of his rare fumbles, which resulted in the Bruins scoring a field goal and once again regaining the lead 27-25. Judd redeemed himself on the next offensive series for Princeton, taking a pass from his brother and eluding 2 tacklers for a big gain. Two plays later, Jason Garrett, avoiding the blitzing Bruin linebackers, ran the ball into the end zone. With 1 minute and 30 seconds left in the game, Frank Leal made a diving interception of Clark's long bomb to clinch the game for the Tigers with a 31-27 victory. The Tigers traveled to New York City for their 4th game of the season to face the hapless Columbia Lions. Last year, Princeton's victory over the Lions brought Columbia the dubious honor of holding the longest losing streak in the history of the sport. The wet weather, however, seemed to be a bad omen of things to come for the Tigers. On their first series, the Lions took a page out of Brown University's playbook to score an opening touchdown with this flea flicker. Fortunately for the Tigers, the play was called back because Columbia's receiver stepped out of bounds while running down the field. After narrowly escaping the Lions' touchdown threat, Princeton took control of the game. Jason Garrett connected for 2 long passes to wide receiver Scott Gibbs for a gain of 50 yards. On a 3rd and goal, Garrett was sacked, and Princeton had to settle for a field goal and a 3-0 lead. The Tiger offense continued to look impressive. Tight end Mark Rockefeller used the wet turf to his advantage, eluding the Columbia secondary and making the reception. Meanwhile, Judd Garrett was showing that his explosive running power was not hampered in the least by the cold, wet weather. This time on 1st and goal, Princeton had no trouble scoring as Chris Keyes picked up a pair of spectacular blocks from Greg DeFelice and Dave Wicks to spring him into the end zone and give the Tigers a 10-0 lead. The Lions, however, were not about to roll over for the Tigers.
High formation. The handoff is to Abruzzese over the right tackle. He's got some room out to the 45-yard line. Now dives out to midfield into Princeton territory. Mayhew goes down the far side on the option. Pitches it back to Abruzzese inside the 30. Breaks the tackle inside the 25-yard line down to the 22-yard line. Another Columbia first down before Mayhew hands off to Abruzzese, who's up the middle across the 40-yard line down to the 35-yard line before he's pushed out of bounds at the 34.
Columbia's running sensation, Greg Abruzzese, single-handedly carried the Lions into Tiger territory to set up a Columbia field goal. Abruzzese had 107 yards rushing in the first half alone. And on Columbia's next offensive series, it was once again Abruzzese who put the Lions into scoring position. With 25 seconds left in the half, Lion quarterback Chris Mayhew lobbed a pass to Matt West in the end zone to pull his team to within 1 point of the Tigers. More importantly, it allowed the Lions to carry the game's momentum with them into the locker room at halftime. During the third quarter, neither team was able to generate much offense, as both teams' defensive units stingily gave up yardage. The Tigers were first to draw blood as Chris Lutz kicked a 27-yard field goal early in the fourth quarter to put Princeton up by a score of 13-9. But from here on out, things started to go wrong with the Tigers. Lutz's kickoff was returned by Chris Brown out to the 50-yard line. Mayhew ran a beautiful naked bootleg around the left side, followed by another rambling run by Greg Abruzzese down to the 1-yard line. As Solomon Johnson powered his way into the end zone, the Columbia Lions began to taste victory. Only 5 minutes remained in the game, and Columbia possessed a crucial but tiny lead. Later, the Tigers seemingly took the lead on a magnificent 22-yard run by Judd Garrett. But the Columbia Lions, who had had bad luck for the last 4.5 years, finally got a break when the touchdown was called back on a clipping penalty. The Tigers finally got the ball back with 38 seconds left in the game and marched the ball down into Lion territory. Coach Steve Toshis opted to go for the tie with 2 seconds left in the game. Princeton had not missed a field goal since the end of the 1986 season. But as Chris Lutz's 49-yard attempt fell short, the end of the Tigers' streak paled in comparison to the end of a 44-game losing streak for the Columbia Lions and their fans. The next week, the Tigers were on the road again to face another winless football team, the 0-5 Bucknell Bison of the Colonial League. Princeton was not at all happy to be known as the team Columbia finally beat, and were ready to take out their frustrations on the Bison. On the first series, Garrett came out throwing, hitting DeFelice for a long gainer into Bison territory. 3 plays later, Garrett pulled a play-action fake and found Mark Rockefeller open on the goal line for a touchdown just 3 minutes into the game. Bucknell was quick to retaliate. The Bison, led by quarterback Scott Auchenbach, moved the ball downfield with relative ease. Tailback Steve Weiss took the pitch from Auchenbach and quickly evened the score at 7-all. Two possessions later, the Tigers were back on the offensive. Dave Wicks made a nice diving catch, but the Tigers once again had trouble down near the goal line and were forced to settle for a field goal from the team's leading scorer, Chris Lutz. The seesaw battle continued, and on Bucknell's next possession, the Bison tied the game as Steve Barimo kicked a 37-yard field goal. When Princeton took the ball back after the kickoff, they wasted no time in scoring another touchdown. It took Judd Garrett just 2 plays. The first, a 16-yard off-tackle run, and the second, a spectacular 54-yard touchdown run, outmotoring the defensive line and backfield. The Princeton offense seemed unstoppable. On their next possession, Jason Garrett threw a 38-yard touchdown pass to number 9 Dave Wicks, his wide receiver, who made a fine catch despite being illegally bumped by the Bucknell safety. The touchdown increased Princeton's lead to 14 points. With 48 seconds remaining in the half, Bucknell wasted no time moving the ball down to the Princeton 25-yard line in just 4 passing plays. From there, Steve Barimo put his foot into a 42-yard kick that just cleared the crossbar to cut the Tigers' lead to 11 points at the end of the half. Bucknell opened the second half like they finished the first. Kickoff returner Dan Skoka fielded a low drive from Jeff Hyde on his own 11 and found a hole in the middle of his blockers to return the ball all the way to the Princeton 22-yard line. Just 3 plays later, it was again Skoka, this time picking up a great block from Greg Gaines on the screen pass to allow the tailback to jog into the end zone. A 2-point conversion brought the Bison to within 3 points of the Tigers. Bucknell's celebration was short-lived, though. Judd Garrett showed why he is one of the league's premier running backs. Taking the pitch from his brother and patiently waiting for his blocks to develop, he sprinted down the short side of the field for a 36-yard gain. From there, Chris Keys easily carried the ball into the end zone thanks to some great blocking by Chris Robertshaw and Greg DeFelice. Lutz's extra point upped the Tigers' lead to 10 points. Judd Garrett continued his running frenzy, utilizing some dazzling footwork to pick up 42 yards. A few plays later, Judd finished off the drive, pulling in a short pass for yet another Princeton touchdown. The Tigers continue to be plagued by poor special teams play. This time, Dad Skoka returned Lutz's kickoff 75 yards and easily set up Bucknell's next touchdown. The diving touchdown made the score Princeton 38, Bucknell 28. The scoring subsided until midway through the fourth quarter when Chris Lutz boosted the Tiger lead to 13 points with a 23-yard field goal. With 1 minute and 40 seconds to go in the game, Bucknell came out passing and added 7 points with a touchdown reception by Steve Guarini. Bucknell attempted an onside kick, but Brad Redmond pulled in the ball for Princeton and assured them a victory. The 41-35 win upped the Tigers' season record to 3 wins, 2 losses. After a fairly easy but sloppy win against Bucknell, Princeton returned to Palmer Stadium to face the Harvard Crimson, last year's Ivy League football champions. To add to the Tigers' pressures, the game was being televised over nationwide cable by ESPN. Both teams got off to a shaky start, but Jason Garrett soon took control, hitting wide receiver Dave Wicks with a short pass in the flat. Wicks masterfully eluded 3 tackles as he spun his way down the sideline. A clipping penalty on 3rd down forced Princeton to settle for a field goal, and Lutz's boot gave the Tigers the game's first lead. Coach Tosh's scolding of the Tigers' special teams after their poor performance at Bucknell seemed to spark the squad, as sophomore Joe Macione leveled Harvard's kick returner David Sun. Macione's hit flustered the Crimson, A few plays later, Harvard star running back Tony Hines fumbled the ball into the hands of Mike Hero. Princeton immediately capitalized on the Harvard mishap. Judd Garrett took a handoff from his brother, and the Tigers' offensive line, dubbed the Pipeline, opened a gaping hole in the Crimson defense for Garrett to run through. Princeton's defense, meanwhile, was immobilizing Harvard's lackluster offense and holding them scoreless for the entire first half. Mike Hero and James Lowry teamed up to flatten Hines on this attempted draw play. Tony Hines seemed to be the brunt of the Tigers' aggression. Inside linebacker Gary Kapinski and tackle Steve Hillegeist stopped Hines in his tracks on 2 consecutive plays near the Harvard goal line. With Hines and the rest of the Crimson offense thoroughly demoralized, Jason Garrett began to put on a show for the television audience and the 18,000 fans in attendance, pump faking a pass and running a keeper down the near sideline to give the Tigers first and goal from the 5. From there, Jason let his brother take over. Judd literally ran over Harvard cornerback Henry Olsen en route to the end zone. Chris Lutz's extra point gave the Tigers a 17-0 lead with only a minute remaining in the half. Princeton's linebacking crew opened the second half in stellar fashion as Gary Kempinski tipped Yohe's pass up in the air and Craig Yates made an unbelievable circus catch for the interception. Unable to move the ball in Crimson territory, the Tigers turned to Chris Lutz, increasing their lead 20-0. On Harvard's next possession, Yohe dropped back in the pocket and rifled a pass straight into the hands of Tiger cornerback James Lowry. As the half progressed, Yohe perhaps was thinking to himself that he should have stayed in the locker room at halftime. First, tight end Rob Walker leveled Yohe from behind. Then, Walker combined with Craig Yates to sack Yohe right as he took the snap. If that wasn't enough, a few plays later, Steve Hillegeist tossed Yohe to the ground for the Tigers' 3rd sack of the day. After a Frank Leal fumble recovery, Princeton added 3 more points early in the 4th quarter on this Chris Lutz 39-yard field goal. The Tigers' hopes of their first shutout since 1985 ended midway through the last quarter, as Yohe was finally able to avoid the Tiger onslaught and thread a pass to backup split end Mark Bianchi deep in the Tiger end zone. Touting a 3-1 record against Ivy League competition, Princeton now faced an undefeated University of Pennsylvania team for their most important game of the season. That there was no love lost between these two teams was evident to the crowd of 24,500 bipartisan fans on hand for the game. On the opening kickoff, Chris Keith, whose brother plays for the Quakers, was given a less than friendly welcome as he was gang tackled at the Princeton 20-yard line. Penn drew first blood in the game as Quaker place kicker Dan Friedenberg just barely caught the far upright to give his team a 3-0 lead. The extremely physical nature of the game continued as Jason Garrett was slammed into the Quakers bench by safety Steve Johnson. Before the day was over, Penn would be penalized 21 times for 168 yards and set a new Ivy League record. Princeton worked the ball downfield with some good leg work by the Tiger running backs. But it was this 23-yard touchdown completion to tight end Mark Rockefeller that gave Princeton a 7-3 lead at the end of the first quarter. The Tiger defense, fired up after last week's trouncing of Harvard, gave Chris Key's brother Brian an equally rude welcome as he tried to work his way through the Tiger line. With his ground game ineffective, Quaker quarterback Malcolm Glover took to the air and found his tight end Dolph Tokarczyk wide open on the right sideline for a Pennsylvania touchdown. Emotions continue to flare in the field. This time, Judd Garrett, frustrating the Quaker defense with his fine running, was driven into the Tigers' bench. The ensuing penalty on the Quakers set up a 32-yard field goal by Chris Lutz to tie the score at 10-all. Penn took over deep in their own territory, and there Glover was sacked twice in a row by Kurt Hovan and Rob Vandenover. But on third down, Glover pump faked and hit Scott Sandler behind the Tiger secondary. From there, Glover connected with Sandler again, who avoided one tackle and scored a Quaker touchdown to give Penn a 17-10 lead at halftime. In the third quarter, Penn picked up another touchdown, while Princeton, desperately trying to stay in the game and in contention for the Ivy League title, watched helplessly as Garrett's pass was deflected at the goal line and intercepted by Penn. It was Garrett's first interception of the season, and for the Tigers, it came at a most inopportune time. The Tigers got back on track midway through the fourth quarter as Jason hooked up with Mark Rockefeller and later his brother Judd for a Princeton touchdown. The unrelenting Quakers were not about to let Princeton get back into the game. On Penn's next possession, Glover burned the Tigers secondary once more. White's reception set up this diving touchdown by Brian Keys, and all but put the game away for the Quakers. With 2 minutes remaining in the game, Garrett scrambled for a Princeton touchdown, but it came a little too late. The Tigers' onside kick attempt failed, and as the Tigers left the field with a 31-23 loss, their chances for an Ivy League championship looked dim. Their hopes of an Ivy League crown all but gone, the Tigers were playing for team pride as they faced non-league opponent, the Colgate Red Raiders. Colgate quarterback Dave Goodwin had obviously been watching game tapes from the Tigers' match against Penn, and on the Raiders' first series, Goodwin picked on the troubled secondary as he hit tailback Hans Ottenott with a 55-yard bomb. Goodwin, normally a backup quarterback, looked impressive in his first outing, scrambling from the Tiger rush to locate his split end, Rick Evans, in the corner of the end zone for a Red Raider touchdown. But Jason Garrett was not about to be shown up by a sophomore and demonstrated his own scrambling abilities by cutting up the sidelines and picking up a beautiful block by Scott Gibbs for a 60-yard gainer. Unable to move the ball any further, the Tigers brought in Chris Lutz to kick a field goal to pull the Tigers to within 4 points of Colgate. On the following kickoff, Colgate's Vance Larimer was stripped of the ball and Tigers' Chris Hallinan recovered it. The play proved to be the turning point of the game, as the Tigers went on to stack up 34 more points before the Red Raiders could score again late in the third quarter. The Tigers' first touchdown came off Garrett's play-action fake, which Jason kept for an easy 6 points. Garrett continued the barrage, utilizing 5 receivers to outman the Colgate secondary and free up Rockefeller for a long gainer. From there, running back Dennis Height made a nice carry after picking up some fine blocks by George Sarsevich, Ed Record, and pulling Chris Robertshaw at guard. Judd Garrett proceeded to walk into the end zone behind Kevin Coop's tremendous block. On Princeton's next two series, wide receiver Dave Wicks pulled in a couple of fine catches to allow the Tigers to pick up 2 field goals and give them a 31-7 lead as they jogged into the locker room at the half. Princeton's defensive unit was once again in fine form. Greg Burton and Frank Leo picked off a pair of errant Colgate passes by Dave Goodwin. Rob Walker and Steve Hillegeist continued to abuse the young sophomore quarterback as the defensive duo sacked Goodwin deep in Colgate territory. But without a doubt, the hit of the game and probably the entire season belonged to Franco Paganelli. As Colgate star running back Hans Ottenott jumped to receive the pass, Paz lowered his shoulder and made the kind of hit that most linebackers only dream of. Ottenott was hit so hard that he had to be carried off the field. Taking a cue from Paganelli, Mike Hero showed that defensive backs can hit as hard as linebackers as he leveled Colgate's receiver into the Tiger sideline. Princeton's only letdown of the game came when Colgate's Joe Martin, aided by the wet grass, returned Remig's punt 60 yards for a Red Raider touchdown. Coach Tashius brought in quarterback Brian Barron for the last quarter, and the senior went to work, rolling out of the pocket and hitting a sliding Mark Rockefeller. The pass set up the Tigers' final touchdown by Chris Keys and gave Princeton a convincing 45-13 victory over the Red Raiders. After their resounding win against Colgate the previous week, the Tigers were confident they could defeat the Yale Bulldogs and thus capture the coveted Big Three title. But Princeton has had a long history of troubled times at the Yale Bowl in New Haven, winning only one game in the last 23 years on the Eli's home turf. On Yale's opening series, things looked less than promising for the Tigers as Yale's running back Buddy Zachary hammered his way for 31 yards and a Yale touchdown. In contrast to Zachary's power style, Judd Garrett's patient running allowed him to get every ounce out of the holes his blockers were opening for him. Jason Garrett then demonstrated his mobility as he waited for Mark Rockefeller to elude Yale's sticky secondary and then hit him with a beautifully timed pass. Garrett showed he not only has power in his passes, but touch also, as he lofted this pass to Dave Wicks up and over Yale's cornerback for a touchdown. The Tigers' defense continued its menacing ways and showed Yale how it allowed Colgate only 147 yards of total offense the previous week. Rob Vandenoven nailed Kaler for a loss and later teamed up with what seemed like the entire Tiger defense to gang tackle Zachary for a loss. Princeton defensive back Frank Leal picked off the first of the team's 4 interceptions of the day. With only seconds remaining in the half, Garrett lofted the ball downfield and a Yale defender tipped it into the hands of Dave Wicks at the 9-yard line. Lutz's field goal then gave the Tigers a 10-7 lead at the half. The second half started just like the first ended. Only this time, Mike Hero became Kevin Kaler's nightmare as he made a stellar one-handed grab of Keller's overthrown pass. Despite their team's lackluster performance, some of the Yale students engaged in their traditional third-quarter striptease. The display of flesh seemed not to distract Judd Garrett, as he took a short pass from his brother and broke one tackle and outran the Bulldogs secondary to give the Tigers a 17-7 lead. Frustrated by Yale's inability to move the ball, head coach Carmen Caza replaced Kaler with Mark Brubaker. Brubaker, however, found the Tigers secondary no less forgiving than his predecessor, and on his second play was picked off by Frank Leal. With the ball back in hand, Judd Garrett increased Princeton's lead 24-7 with this jaunt into the end zone. The Tigers clinched the game with 4 minutes left as Frank Leal nabbed his third interception of the game to tie a school record and earn him honors as the Ivy League's Defensive Player of the Week. Coupled with their earlier win over Harvard, the victory over the Bulldogs gave the Tigers their second Big Three title of the decade. The Princeton Tigers headed for their final game of the 1988 season with a chance at their first 7-win season since 1966. Both the Tigers and the Dartmouth Big Green were out of contention for the Ivy League crown, so the game was being played solely for team pride. Jason Garrett looked impressive once again, but this week with his running, not passing. Garrett scrambled for 66 yards in the first half alone. Judd Garrett then picked up where his brother left off, turning what seemed like a no-gainer into a 12-yard touchdown run. Late in the first quarter, Princeton drove deep into Dartmouth territory, but was unable to generate much offense. On fourth down, Chris Lutz successfully kicked a 24-yard field goal, giving him 82 points on the year and setting a new Princeton record for kicking points in a season. The stingy Tiger defense was busy sacking Dartmouth quarterback Mark Johnson. Junior linebacker Franco Paganelli put on a show, dropping Johnson 4 times in the first half alone. With Paganelli in Johnson's face, the Big Green were only able to muster a field goal during the entire first half. Once in Dartmouth territory, the Tiger offense was plagued by penalties and sacks, and Brad Remig was continually forced to punt. Remig was up to the task as he landed a perfect backspin punt on the Dartmouth 3-yard line. The Tigers' joy was very short-lived, though. On the next play, fullback David Clark found a hole in the defensive line and simply outmotored the entire Princeton defense as he ran 97 yards for the touchdown. Clark's sprint set a new Ivy League record for the longest run for scrimmage and tied the game at 10-all. At the beginning of the fourth quarter, the Big Green sacked Garrett on 4th and 2 to regain possession of the ball. 2 plays later, Mark Johnson threw a 60-yard pass to his split end, Craig Morton, as Morton simply burned Frank Leal for the Dartmouth touchdown. The pass gave Dartmouth a 7-point lead early in the fourth quarter. The Tigers retaliated on the next series as Garrett completed 6 passes, including this beautiful diving catch by Dave Wicks. Garrett topped off the drive with an 11-yard touchdown pass to his brother Judd to even the score at 17-all. Mark Johnson wasted no time in moving Dartmouth back in striking distance of the Tiger goal line. He connected with his tailback, Brendan Mahoney, for a 25-yard gainer. From there, David Clark sailed up and over the Tiger defense to give the Big Green a 24-17 lead. With 6 minutes to go in the game, Jason Garrett began to march the Tigers back downfield. On 3rd and 7, Garrett tried to go for the touchdown, but ended up throwing the ball into the hands of cornerback Mike Campanelli. A bright note for Jason Garrett was that his 26 successful passes upped his season completion percentage to 68.2%, and thus set a new NCAA Division I AA record. And despite the loss, the Tigers finished with their second consecutive winning season.